Hey friends, Wayne over here at the Ram Man. Here's some helpful information. It may save you some time, money, and some grief. I wanted to talk about our second generation boosters. We duplicated the original Tandem Bendix booster that came out in 1962 on the Imperial, which was later used on the C bodies, the B bodies, and the Hemi cars. And here is an example of an original Hemi booster. Here's his brackets. Hemi setup has a slightly different bolt pattern than the other boosters. Which brings me to this right here. So, the original Tandem Bendix booster, some people call it bullet nose booster, is an extremely powerful booster. It was one of the most powerful, except for a truck, during the 60s and the early 70s. It packs a lot of punch. So it was designed for the Imperial, which was the biggest, heaviest boat. That's the flagship. Everything was first class on the Imperial, and it was also bigger. Basically has the same suspension dimensions as a D200. And originally this booster, like I said, was designed for the 1962 Imperial, because it was a redesign, and they were trying to push that great big 1 and 1/8" bore drum master cylinder. That original single circuit, what we call a jar top. They were stepping up to an 1 and 1/8" bore because the car had gotten so heavy and they wanted to get some stopping power. So they designed a Tandem Bendix, which basically means it's two boosters in one. They don't really do half the work. The rear section does over about 60%, and the front does about 40%. There's about a 30%, 35% more power than a single booster. So, it packs a lot of punch. So, you know, about a third. So, you running 400 horsepower, you get to jump to 600, that's quite a damn big improvement. You with me? So, something like that. So, anyway, came out in 62, used on the Imperials until we get to 65 and 66. Then it was brought in on the new C body platform. Now, in the Imperials, of course, like I said, it was designed to push a great big old 1 and 1/8" bore master cylinder, which is a great big old bore for a car, especially at the time, 1962. And so, when Chrysler did introduce the disc brakes in late 65 on C bodies and A bodies, they decided that they would use this Tandem booster because they wanted to drive an 1 and 1/8" disc brake master cylinder, which this style Bendix was introduced in 1967. The casting numbers on it were 222-6821. So they were already familiar with master cylinder flows, how the power brakes work, and so they took the best that they had off the flagship Imperial and brought it on to the other lines and used extensively on the disc brake cars. The Tandem Bendix booster was never used on a drum brake car except the early Imperials. It was never used on a drum brake car except the Imperial. And of course, they also decided to use it on when they came out with the Hemi setup. So, I used to have some paperwork on that. Bendix and Chrysler got together. They engineered a booster and a setup and a disc brake setup to fit in there along with that Hemi motor. They did, it's one of the, as far as corporate cars, fastest things of all time. They did it in like 4 months, 120 days. A Hemi booster is exactly the same as a normal booster, except the rear case is different. The bolt pattern is different. The bolt pattern is designed to fit the brackets. Although they look very similar, they are not the same. This is a Hemi booster, and this is an 8BD rod. This is off 67 to 70 B-body. That's what that is. And while we're talking about bolt patterns, I'll just simplify something for you. The length of the rod and the mounting bolt pattern determines what car it goes on. They could not make a different booster for every single car line. So, depending on distances from the firewall to the dash to the pedal, they would use different rods and rod lengths. Such as, if you see these right here, I just happen to have, well, hell, I just happen to have 4 in front of you. So, this big old long thing with a kind of a flat back came off of a C body. This came off of a B body. This is a Hemi. This is for a, what was he? 65, 66 Imperial. Okay. Yes, so basically this tandem Bendix booster was used for basically about 7 different configurations. And here's just an example. So the pattern and the length and size of the rod is what dictates the application. Now on this tandem Bendix, there was actually about 7 different rods. 7 different rods. Now, the bolt patterns were the same, except on the Hemi. So, we got 6 that are the same, and 7 different rods. Here's an example of them. All different lengths, configurations, and I'll give you an example so that you can see. This is an old prior book. So, we have right here, we have Imperial. We start off with 62 with power steering. We come over here, pedal rod code. We come down here, started off with a CH1, 64 to 66 using the IM1, 67, 8, 7 CD, 9 CD. So you get the point. Then when we come over here to, oh, let's go over here to, well, there's the charger. Let's come over, something like the Monaco, C-body. Monaco, Polara, great big OC body. I told you they came with them. Here we go. 7 CD, 9 C, 9 CD. These are all different lengths and different sizes. And what they did was, they stamped them on the side of the rod. I don't know if you can see it. That's the IM1. That's the 8BD. So, anyway, you get my point. if you don't have the right bolt pattern and you don't have the right rod and length of rod, boy, whatever you've got or bought, it is not very helpful. And length is real important because in general it hooks to your pedal, which is about that long. And of course you got to understand it hooks up, you know, sort of close to the pivot up here. So by the time you get down to your little foot pad or whatever, a 1/4 inch difference in a rod is great big on your pedal, towards the floor, up off the floor. I mean, it's a big old difference. So just imagine if you jumped in your truck or whatever one morning and all of a sudden the pedal was in 2 inch different frickin' place. It'd be fucking weird and it'd take a little while to get used to. But that's what'll end up happening. Now, it'll work alright depending on the, well, no, if you got a really short one like this versus a long one like that off that C-body, it won't work. So, anyway, so now you guys understand that. Now, in closing, what I wanted to tell you is, as far as a 62 and up Chrysler, all the way to 76 or so, 74 on some models, there is nothing more powerful or work better than Tandem Bendix. It is the badass, it's the top of the line, you can't do any better. Maybe with a Hydra boost, but there ain't too many Hydra boosts on cars, they're on trucks and up. So that puts it in perspective. To clarify, we'll say an automobile vacuum booster. This is as badass as it gets. That's why in 2012 and 13 I brought this to market. Basically what we did was we copied the Tandem Bendix booster. If you look, it is extremely similar to an original. It is extremely similar to the original. The only difference is we were able to use some European guts, which were a little cheaper, and the hub. The rear hub is slightly larger than the original. That's because the guts were the size that they were, and the rear hub is matched up, because what you guys have to understand is these boosters breathe in and out air from the rear hub. That's how they breathe. The vacuum operates the inside, but air has to come and go, exhaust and intake. Right? Like when you push down on this and everything goes forward, air has to come in behind it. So this is the air intake on a booster. The rear hub, you guys probably never thought about it, but that's the air intake. Kind of like the air intake for a compressor. That's why you see foam and filters and shit like that in there. That's what that's about. And so what we got is the rear hub on this is slightly bigger than the original, which of course allows it to operate faster, and it's slightly more powerful even than the original. It's about 10% more powerful than the original. I've got an old video, and I have some clients out there that only have about 10 inches of vacuum because they run in some big cams. Now, ain't a lot of reserve, but this sumbitch will operate down to about 10 inches. And a normal car at idle has 16, 17, 18. Some of the newer cars and trucks will have 20 and 22. So, but that's how powerful this thing is. So the only thing that you have to do to mount it, depending on your firewall plate, whether it be an original B-body like this, or whether it be like a C-body or an Imperial, all you have to do is just open up your firewall plate, reinforcement plate, just a little bit. Get your $10 carbide cutter and your little air tool or air sander or something like that. But That's all you gotta do, is just open up your original hole so that it fits around your hub. That's what you gotta do. So, that's it. Of course, the spacing and everything is the same. And so we have these available, and all we do is install the appropriate rod for whatever you've got. So, if you've got, last year they were used, 1971. So, if you have a Mopar 62 to 1974, an Imperial, a C body, a B body, or an E body, and you need a new booster, you can get a second gen booster with the correct rod, brand new and all that. So, very few rebuilders left out there. We're still going, but they're getting very few, and a lot of people would like to buy a brand new booster, a more powerful booster, than rebuild some old thing and wait. So, just wanted to let you guys know that we've got these second generation boosters. All you gotta do is call us up and tell us what buggy you got, and we'll configure it and send that bad boy out. Alrighty? There you go. God bless you. God bless America. And happy Mopar.